I'm Tony Vlahos. Welcome to another Fresh Start interview brought to you by ExecuNet. So, if you're thinking about a new career, how do you know if you really need a change? Are your feelings normal when they're up and down? Is there more to it? Maybe even warning flags you need to pay attention to. For answers today, we'll turn to Dr. Jenna Koritz, a therapist at Azimuth Psychological, who works with people in high pressure careers. Jenna, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, what are some subtle signs beyond the obvious burnout? Because a lot of us claim to know what that looks like and we feel it. What are some of the other signs that indicate it is time for a change?
Yeah, I think one that's commonly overlooked is irritability.
Hmm.
A constant state of just being annoyed by things. And of course, we're all annoyed by daily life activities and, something gets in the way, things like that, of what we're trying to do, which is all the time. We're late, we're flat tire, all of that, but kind of above and beyond that, like a constant state of irritability and just being annoyed all the time. That's a really good indication that you need a change. And whether that's with your job or not, that's a different discussion. And another one that I think sort of along the same lines that gets ignored a lot is boredom, because I think people mistake boredom for other things. And so if you're just talking about work, being bored at work can look a lot of different ways, but if you really sit down and think about like, is this interesting to me? Not all of work is interesting, of course, but is the majority of it interesting? Is this the kind of work I want to be doing? Is it aligned with my values? Is this, how I want to spend all of my time? Because we spend so much time working, and you want to make sure that that's at least congruent with your values and how you want to spend your time, at least, most of the time.
Mhm. Now, there are some great emotional and other risks with making a change when you can spot it. How do you cope with those things? Ideally, better than cope with those things.
How do you cope with just the idea of change or going through the actual emotions?
Well, going through the idea of it first, then we can talk about the motions, but I'm drawing your attention to some of the risks that a lot of us tell ourselves we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's tricky about risk is it's very easy before you make a change to see what is lost, but you can't actually know or feel what is gained.
Mhm.
And so, we have to really, I mean, that's why how like pro and con lists, develop and things like that, because it's really hard to, you can only really see the loss. And so I always encourage people to think about, yeah, we all think about the catastrophes down the line, or the ways in which things could go really poorly, but also in the ways in which they could go well, because that's the reason for considering the change at all. And if the reasons for making the change are, make you feel positive and excited and enthusiastic, well, you have to learn to manage the downside to that as well. And that's a really complicated thing to do. And it's really dependent on someone's personal situation, where they work, the culture of their workplace, financial, incentives, things like that. So it's a complicated thing to do, but I think taking a bigger step back and trying to get away from the fear, because making fear-based decisions isn't always the best idea. We do it all the time, myself included, but you don't want fear to be driving the bus.
So let's assume you've made your pros and cons list
Hmm.
and you're confident that you need to go. How do you approach that move, emotionally, physiologically, even? How do you do that?
I think one way to manage the emotional piece is actually via logistics. I think a lot of people that we see are sort of think about this sort of in an all or nothing kind of way. Like if I'm going to make a change, I'm going to make it, and my lifestyle's going to be really different, and this is what it's going to look like. And in reality, the actual shift, like the change, can be stepwise. There could be sort of a roadmap to the actual change, which could take more time, and ultimately that might be the least stressful option for people. So, for example, instead of I have a lot of clients, or we have a lot of clients who really want to just go into work one day, throw their book out the windows, be like, see you guys, peace out. You guys were the worst, and have a whole thing. But in reality, um, just making a clean break and then finding something new is really hard. And also the transition from one workplace culture to another is also really difficult. And a lot of times the change comes along with financial, differences in pay. So I always recommend to kind of think about things stepwise. Okay, so, you know, there's a lot of what we talk about is also essentially golden handcuffs, and what people are paying for, and people have a lot to pay for now, and things are really expensive. And so, if you're not able to let go of a job partly because of the financial piece to it, well, when could you? Or what could that look like? Or is there something in between that you could take in the meantime, like as a stepping stone, and kind of thinking it more broadly that way as not just like a clean break, but more dimensional kind of transition out. And I think if you think about it that way too, like, great, I've made this choice, but I don't need to do it right the second. I can think about it, I can prepare, I can, make a whole plan for myself that's really going to work out. I think that can really diminish a lot of the fear and anxiety and worry that people have about making such a big transition.
Yeah, you mentioned the golden handcuffs.
Mhm.
There is this sunken cost fallacy. A lot of the executives we work with who are struggling and are thinking, well, I really want to make a change. I'm unhappy. I'm unappreciated. I am not paid what I'm worth. And yet, I've invested so much in this organization. What do you say to people that are struggling with that?
There's a cost to everything. And I think people just need to decide what that cost is for them to transition out. So it's never going to be perfect. It's kind of like the saying, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. So, yeah, you've put a lot of time and money and effort into this company. Sweat equity is a real thing. You've built so many hours, you've worked all this time to become partner, like all of those things that you're talking about. That's true, but that doesn't change your current situation and your reality and what you want, because also what people want over time can change. And the personal situation changes, things happen, they get older, they have families, whatever. And so, it's okay. Like, you have permission to have invested into something that's not a lifelong journey for you. And maybe part of your journey is doing that so that you can learn more things about yourself and make that shift. Like, maybe that was the cost of learning about this, if you will.
Right. So let's pretend, final question. Let's
Sure.
pretend I have done my pros and cons list. I'm ready. What's the first thing you recommend I do?
Start somewhere. There's no specific roadmap. I think honestly, the initiation of starting is almost the hardest part sometimes of, looking into what the other options are. What does that look like? Starting to up your professional and personal networks to kind of get more information, all of that. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of work to get a new job, and it's a lot just alone. And then if you're taking on top of that, like switching out of an industry or going in-house or, going to a medical startup as opposed to working in a hospital, those are big cultural shifts too. So just gathering information, there's a lot of stuff to do, but it doesn't actually in some ways matter where you start. You just have to start because you're going to get to all the things anyway. And there's no real prescribed map for anybody that will guarantee success or happiness or, is the most efficient way from A to B. It really depends. So I think we always encourage people just to do something.
Okay, and if our listeners wanted to talk to you, could they do that? How can they reach you?
Yeah, yeah. So my company is called Azimuth. So azimuthpsych.com is where all of our stuff is. We have tons of media you can read if you're interested more about all these topics. We have an app that just came out that's values-based learning. I'm sorry, values-based living. If that's something that you're interested in, we have free resources, free tools like burnout calculator and things like that. So we try to provide a lot of resources that aren't just our individual services, but of course we have that too. But we're all reachable. I'm it's my personal email is the one that you can find. So I'm happy to answer questions anytime.
Terrific, Jenna. Thanks for making time today. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.